So I'd love you to talk a little bit about the sort of management that you would like to see if we had the money and a full-time conservation agent, etc., to do it.
That's really interesting. We're having a big discussion in the natural resources community, the forestry community, and this is coming under the Biden executive order on mature and old-growth forests. There's a re-emphasis on the value of old-growth forests and mature forests, and how are we going to manage our forests moving into the future, because there's a stronger realization that, we didn't do it too well 200 years ago or so. Sorry, I'm just checking out this tree because I'm trying to figure out what it is. And so the exciting thing about this conversation is we are talking about incorporating, partnering with Indigenous people to steward the forests using a blend of Western science and Indigenous knowledge and stewardship and understanding. I think that won't happen for probably another generation, just how human institutions move. So that's a long way of saying that the way I've been brought up as a scientist, I guess I'd say, from my student years on, is, we used to have this notion of wilderness, which meant there was no one in the forest, and that's wrong. That's very wrong in a lot of ways. I've been really lucky to be in some of the different, most incredible forests in the world. I've seen essentially the northernmost trees on Earth.
Yeah.
And what I saw there really shocked me at first, and then I saw a small clear cut, very small, maybe 30, 40 feet in diameter, maybe a little bit bigger. And I was like, why are they cutting the forest up here? This is old growth, wilderness, blah, 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 with my Western forestry mindset. And that was wrong. And then I paused for a second and I thought, oh, there's no sun for 6 months. It's really cold up here. We're at 72 degrees latitude, north latitude. Yeah, they need timber. They need wood for fuel and for heat and for all. And I was like, well, yeah, of course. Mm-hmm. But it took that to start to break my mind from this wilderness idea. But I still have it in me a little bit. I think sometimes forests on their own are kind of okay.
Yeah, lots of questions about that.
But I would say we could maybe manage this a little bit differently. Part of my hesitation in some ways of managing everything comes down to resources, actually. Like, there's exotic species in this understory, and
buckthorn.
Yeah, right. There's buckthorn in here. There's knotweed is a little farther into the forest than I remember, and there's multiflora rose. There's some big patches up over this way, right? We don't necessarily want those in our ecosystem because they crowd out other species and habitat. But do we have the time and energy to take care of all of this? And what I mean is the time and energy that would be used to this, could it be used for creating more green spaces? There's a really provocative book, and that one changed my mind nicely as well. And I can't remember the author's name, but it's called Rambunctious Garden. And the author, she puts forth the idea that there is no ecosystem that's always quite been there. And humans have always changed ecosystems. I mean, like beavers do, like elephants do. We're just another animal sometimes. And then she went around the world and looked at ecosystems that had exotic species coming in. And some people were like, the species isn't that bad. The species isn't from here, but it's doing some good things. It's keeping the soil intact. It's providing habitat for this. And she just made a strong case that our ecosystems have always, from a Western position, been messy. And they're going to continue to get messy right now. We're not going back in that trajectory right now because of the species we lost, right? There's American chestnut saplings on this bank. 200, 300 years ago, there would be American chestnut that would be this big.
Yeah.
That would be natural.
Yeah.
But they're gone. I haven't seen any hemlock, but there probably are a few hemlock, but they're just about gone. It'll be hard to see given now that the leaves are gone, but ash is on the way out, and beech leaf disease is in here. So there's a beautiful American beech, and I just checked on it.
So the hemlock's gone because of
hemlock lily delgid.
Okay, so that's right.
Is that a fungus?
It's a little insect that basically attaches to the base of the leaf of eastern hemlock, and it basically drains the tree of its energy.
Okay.
And in warmer environments, that happens in 2 or 3 years. In cooler environments up here, it's been ongoing for 20 years, and some trees survive and some don't.
So some of them aren't going to survive, you think?
Yeah. When I first moved here in school woods, I was really surprised to see hemlock without hemlock lily delgid. So hemlock is not a common species around here, so we're also thinking it's kind of an isolated population. So somehow maybe they're escaping hemlock lily delgid, but it'll get here. And then there's a big American beech 3/4 of a mile down the trail, so one of my favorite trees on this trail, and it's finally got beech leaf disease.
Okay.
So in about 2 years or less, it'll be done.
And the ash and the chestnut, it's the pathogens also.
Yeah, it's all pathogens coming in from our economic trade mostly. Initially, it was scientists and other folks bringing in exotic pests like spongy moth, which used to be called gypsy moth. But now it's really economic trade and not checking pallets. It's really almost that. It's not quite that simple, but it's pretty close. Pallets and nursery trade.
Right.
Where a lot of diseases
Yeah.
So our forest is, from a classical vegetation definition, it's going to become messy because we're losing major species, and we have buckthorn and knotweed, but we'll have Norway maple in this area, so Norway maple might come into this forest. And so we're seeing a great transition. And so how do we manage that?
Yes. What are your thoughts about that?
I am now of the feeling that we live with it in the near term, because we, not just humans, we and other animals and plants will probably do much better when we have more green spaces.
You mean, what do you mean by green spaces?
Parks and natural areas like this one.
Right.
I don't know how much green space there is to expand in Maynard with such a tight, dense population, but as a society as a whole, more forests will be better for us. And I guess you could do studies on that, and then there are studies about the positive health impacts about trees and neighborhoods and cities. Yeah. But think about what happened during the pandemic.
Yeah, people started walking.
People in this forest, someone at the other end of this trail started raking it because their dog was slipping on the leaves. That's what he said. I don't know if I believe that. But people came out here and started modifying this trail because they were coming out here so much.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
People went to the forest.
Yeah.
And so that's a really big indication to me without study that we value it, even though we are more of a internet, TV, go to the city species. Yes. We still love the forest. Yeah. It's just that we don't take the time.
So when you think about Indigenous thinking and how that might benefit the sort of management practices in a place like Maynard, what do you think of?
Yeah. So I can't really speak to that as an authoritarian at all, as an authoritarian, with much knowledge on that. I'm not Indigenous. I've worked with Indigenous people in other parts of the world. And it feels important to me to think about how many different tribes and nations of indigenous people there were and are still today, and just how there are many different countries, let's say in Europe, that are tiny compared to the United States, but they have distinct culture, food,
Yeah.
and all that. I think we need to recognize that for indigenous people and not talk about a monolithic style
Sure.
of forest stewardship. So
Okay.
one, I can't really say, and I shouldn't speak to that, but we did have a session in Maynard on old growth forests, and Andre Strong Bearheart came and spoke. And let's see the chair across the way.
Oh yeah.
There's another one up the way where it's more developed than that. You'll see. And we were talking about the Atlantic white cedar ecosystem, and Atlantic white cedars are important for the tree, for the Nipmuc people of Nipmuc. And he started talking about what he wanted to do and what they wanted to do with Atlantic white cedar. They were trying to work with a state park to cut down, 8 rather small Atlantic white cedars. And because it's a park, the state of Massachusetts manager of that park denied the request initially. And then it was a long process of basically saying, but this is our land, and this is what we do as Nipmuc, and we really feel like we should be able to do this again. And I think that something finally worked out. But when he conveyed how they work with the Atlantic white cedar ecosystem, it's completely different, and I'm telling you, completely different than how Western science thinks about how Atlantic white cedar ecosystems change over centuries.
Right.
And I'm working on something with another scientist from the U.S. Forest Service, and he brought up Atlantic white cedar and said how, it's catastrophic fire is how the Atlantic white cedar regenerates itself. You need big fires to burn it all down, and then it regenerates like a Western U.S. pine forest idea, or lodgepole pine, or something like that. And I'd heard that for 15, 20 years now, that's what a lot of people who specialize in Atlantic white cedar, that you need big fires to burn it all down, and then it'll regenerate. But what Andre said was, we take a few trees every once in a while. That's completely different stewardship approach.
Yeah.
Just like remove, like cutting the trees down?
Just cutting a few trees down.
Yeah.
They were using them for poles for structures.
Oh, okay.
So they didn't even need big trees either.
Yeah.
They were taking small trees. And I'm sure that's one way that Atlantic white cedar forests are managed. But I'm sure maybe other indigenous folks, let's say in the Carolinas or up in Maine, might have stewarded those forests a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So I don't want to put a broad blanket on it, because people are people, and food is different in the Carolinas than up in New York State. And I would imagine that then how you interact with the forest is different in different parts of the world. So there might be times when indigenous folks would